Welcome to another episode of Extraordinary Ordinary Women. And I'm excited to be able to share with you stories of ordinary women in our community who have had a dream or a passion and an idea and followed it through to fruition. Their stories will encourage you, uplift you, and hopefully inspire you to ignite the seed of greatness within your heart. For it's through sharing that we come to realize that we are not Robinson Crusoe, all alone on our own little island, but that there is, particularly now with social media, this network of truly amazing women who willingly stretch out their hand with encouragement. Having found this for myself when my life was turned upside down, it's my gift to those women to be able to pay forward the gift of encouragement to others. So, without further ado, I have great pleasure in introducing you to Candida Baker. Now, Candy is an author, a journalist, a photographer, equine therapist, and horse rescuer. Candy originates from London, was raised in a literary theatrical family, which would appear to have some influence in how her life evolved. After a theatre trip with the Royal Shakespeare Company, she came to Australia and 2 years later emigrated, initially covering a car rally for the London Times, which kickstarted her writing and journalism career. Now, her writing spans several genres. The most recent was published earlier this year, Light and Shadow. And I also mentioned in particular her 2021 memoir, The Heart of a Horse, because it reflects her journey of transformation and deep connection with animals, land, and the human heart, all of which resonates with my own. After a decades-long career in journalism and editing at major Australian publications, Candy turned her love for horses into a calling, becoming an equine-facilitated learning therapist. Now say that fast 3 times. And rescuer of countless horses. And it is in this area of her life that we are delving into today, where she has been able to help people move through profound life challenges through their interactions with her horses. So, hello and welcome, Candy.
Hello, Margarita. Thank you for having me on the program.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And we're going to enjoy your story, I'm sure. So, Candy, what a diverse and fascinating career you have enjoyed. Would you share with us, please, what led you to working with both horses and people? Because both can be rather fragile at times and in need of very special support.
Yes, that's absolutely true. One thing I would just like to say to make a small correction there, because the equine therapy world is very structured. So what I am is actually an equine facilitated learning practitioner rather than therapist.
Oh,
so
right.
just to make that small distinction.
Right.
Yes, so I guess the 2 main passions in my life have always been horses and writing. And then, as you mentioned, I actually grew up in the country in England. I lived in London. I was born in London and was there for the first 5 years, but then grew up in the country. And I had a big connection to the land and to horses. But I also then wanted to act because my father was an actor, and I went into the theatre and then became a journalist. So the horses were always there in my life. They never left my life. When I emigrated here, when I was 22, my then partner and I, we had 1,700 acres up near Hill End, and I had horses there. And I used to exercise people's horses in Centennial Park. So they were always there. And then how the whole journey with the horses and people began was really through my son, who turned out to have inherited the horse gene. which has come through a very direct line from my great-grandfather who bred Cleveland Bays in Yorkshire, and down through my father to me and then to Sam. And he was absolutely obsessed with horses from a very early age. And then by the time he was 6 or 7, all he wanted to do was show jump. And so when he was 10, we bought him, which now looking back on it, was actually a completely unsuitable horse for a 10-year-old boy, because he was a 12-year-old Arabian who'd only been gelded and started under saddle 2 years before,
Right.
Johnny. But Johnny loved to jump. That's what Johnny loved to do. He just absolutely loved it. And Johnny and Sam kind of fell in love with each other.
I was just
But the
thinking
problem,
that,
yeah, it was a match, but it wasn't an easy match, because Johnny was a feisty little Arabian and fast, and Sam was only 10. But the thing with Johnny was that he had terrible manners. And so for the first time in my life, because I'd always had, and this is the case for a lot of people, is that they always have, well, they're lucky enough to have easy enough horses,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So they're never really brought up, or suddenly they're brought up against a horse that is not well behaved or has issues. Johnny didn't have any physical issues, and he loved people, but he wouldn't stand still when you saddled him. He wouldn't stand still when you bridled him. He wouldn't stand still, basically. That was actually basically his problem. And so anyway, long story short, Sam had a little accident off him, not a bad one, in the arena, riding him around bareback, and he fell off and broke his arm. And I thought, I have to find a way to teach his horse manners. But
Right.
I didn't want to do it in the way my father. So a lot of my work with horses has actually been as a direct influence of my father's very hard horsemanship
Yes. Of that time.
of that time,
Yes.
and his very harsh teaching of me with horses. And I very instinctively knew that this wasn't how I wanted to be with horses. So anyway, there's a wonderful horseman called Adam Sutton, who actually trained the horses for the movie Brokeback Mountain. And he is a practitioner of natural horsemanship. And so I found Adam, and Johnny went off to Adam to learn some manners. And what he did in 6 weeks with him was absolutely astounding.
Right.
So, and it was all based on pressure and release.
Yes.
And I guess if you were going to sum up, so this is now 23 years ago, when I first learned about this, that in a sense, where this connects with people is that if you fast forward to now, what I've learned with my training with horses, particularly with rescue horses and trauma horses, and what I've learned with putting people with trauma or anxiety or PTSD or depression with a horse, is it's finding that very sweet spot between, if you like, a little bit of pressure and the release.
Release, yes.
And when you find that, then there's this enormous letting go of tension in the horse and in the human. And so gradually, I rescued my first horse when I was only 22, and I was riding in Centennial Park, and a little Arabian stallion that was neglected fell into my hands, and he and I had our Arabians have had a fairly constant presence in my life, actually. And anyway, I turned him into a beautiful riding pony. He went to a family near Dubbo, and that was my first taste of horse rescue. And after that, I didn't rescue a horse for a long time, but then they suddenly started coming in again around the time that Sam got Johnny, and I'd moved out of Sydney. I'd left major journalism behind me, and the horses were very deeply kind of calling to me. And so, and they found me, and they keep on finding me. I'm 70 now, and so they could perhaps stop soon, but so far it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. But yes, so a horse would find me. And gradually over the years, so first of all, it was primarily concentrated on the horses. And that's where I learned about how horses manifest anxiety, physical, how they manifest pain. I began to learn really there's no such thing as a naughty horse.
That's true.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know, and I just learned every horse that came through me for one reason or another, for retraining or rehabilitation or rescue or an off the track that Sam and I were working with, taught me more and more and more. And at the same time, I've always had volunteer helpers, usually international ones. And these young women would come and they would work with me with the horses.
Right.
And that's how I gradually began to see how I could teach these young women who weren't necessarily looking to be with a horse for a therapeutic reason. But I would see that often teaching them to relax in the presence of a horse would produce these extraordinary kind of releases for them.
So, Candy, is that how you began working with horses and people because of your volunteers that were coming through with you?
Yes, that
Wow.
was really the start of it. Yeah.
Wow.
And young women still come to me. I've been hosting international volunteers now for since 2006, and I've got two lovely girls with me now, and they still come to me. But then also then, as I got more and more interested in natural horsemanship and integrated that into my training and studied more with various practitioners, I realized that I wanted to put a kind of qualification around what I was doing so that then I could make the work wider than just with my girls. Although I really, really love that. I feel as if when the girls come to me and I show them things with the horses, that it's almost like the pebble in the pond.
Yeah.
They'll go away and it ripples out and out and out.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. But you've touched the lives of people with post-traumatic stress and major challenges in their life. How has that come about?
Uh, well, it came about because every now and then when I put initially a helper with a horse, they would have some life-changing experience. I mean, they would burst into tears. They would get potentially maybe even angry or frustrated that they couldn't make what they wanted the horse to understand, to get the horse to understand it. And then they would suddenly get a breakthrough moment. And so then when I had done my EFL, I became, for 3 years, I was the practitioner for equine therapy for a mob in Byron Bay, where I was living near at the time, called Raindrum. And so they would send clients to me, and that had chosen the equine program
Yes.
as part of their process for recovering from various diseases and stresses in their lives. And that's when I began to really up the ante in terms of understanding what it was that a horse could offer a human, and then also understanding what a human can offer a horse.
Yes. It's a partnership, isn't it?
Mm.
Very much so.
And it's not necessarily, it's you've got to know your horse and you've got to know your human. So you can't put a young green horse that's never um that's hasn't yet its own self dropped into its own innate ancient horse wisdom, with someone who's seriously uh anxious and scared of horses. That's not going to work. So it's very much choosing your horse, but gradually over the years I've built up a little herd that have these different skill sets
Quality. Yes. Yes.
and
Yeah.
qualities, and they're able to connect with people
Yeah.
in different ways, and they're quite profound. And if you wanted one very extreme example, I unfortunately had to put her to sleep before I moved over here, which was a deep sadness. But I had a 27-year-old ex-racehorse who'd then become a brood mare and had then become a rescue horse and was rescued originally by a charity that I went on to run called Save a Horse Australia, which is one of Australia's biggest horse rescue charities. And Tyra, this big, beautiful grey, when I took over the charity, I decided to train 3 or 4 of the young ones that had been in the sanctuary for a long time. And I felt that it was time that they, took the next step up and got some training and they could be adopted out. And Tyra came with me to be the matriarchal mare because she was a very kind horse, but also quite a strong horse. And I loved her so much that I adopted her. And she stayed with me until before we moved. Anyway, she was a wonderful, wonderful horse. And what she had was this extraordinary gentleness that she gave to people. But she also was a leader horse. And so if someone was working with her and asking her to do things like to step out of the way or move sideways, or if you didn't ask her properly, she wouldn't do it. She'd be more likely to do it for a little 2-year-old child.
Yes, they're
because
amazing.
she would know that
Yes.
that's what they wanted her to do. But if a grown-up asked her and didn't ask her correctly with what she felt was enough respect, she wouldn't do it.
They
So
are
I had
amazing. I've seen examples of that. Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
So
She was
on next, a great horse, and I
just want to finish this little story because this is important. So because it really shows how it connects, which is that this young man came to me,
right,
and he'd been a young professional cricketer, and he had massive issues in his body, and he'd undergone operations, and he was in a very deep depression, and he was very unable to move on with his life. He was very stuck at the time that he came, and he was trying to find ways to move on. And I put him with Tyra, and Tyra just point blank, very nicely refused to do what Tom was asking her to do. And I was standing outside looking, and I was saying, just put a tiny little bit more pressure, ask her a little bit more firmly, be a bit. And suddenly I realized that Tom wasn't in his body.
right.
And I literally said to him, Tom, get back in your body. And it was almost like you could see this electric shock go through him. And he asked again with no more force, and Tyra stepped back.
Wow.
Yeah, that was probably the clearest moment.
That actually would lead me on into my next, the second next question of the rewards. But before we go to the rewards, because that is just such a powerful story, I'd really like you to share what some of the challenges have been along your journey, this particular part of your journey.
Well, I think the challenges with rescue horses are specific to each horse, because I've had horses that have been so seriously traumatized that even after 3 years, I still can't walk up and catch them. But I've created a relationship where they understand I'm not going to abuse them, and I've still had a relationship with that particular horse, quite a deep one, really. So the challenge with a rescue horse could be anything from rescuing, in one case, a little Brumby who had been taken from the wild, but taken from the wild by people who didn't know what they were doing, and he just would ride roughshod, try to bite, kick, So working with dangerous horses, yes, I've worked with a few dangerous horses. That's probably been the single most difficult challenge, has been to keep yourself safe and teach the horse actually, you'll be safe if you learn not to do these things.
Yes.
With and whilst not resorting to violence,
Yes.
because a dangerous horse can trigger you, you know.
Oh,
So there's
absolutely. Yes. Yes.
yeah, so there's a very fine line to draw between when it's appropriate to use a very sudden, swift correction that is speaking the same language as the horse would speak to another horse.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And that is really integral to everything I do. So some horses have required that. And when they require it and when they receive it, it's extraordinary, the transformation. It is really literally like a child that has got away with blue murder and is suddenly told, no, sorry, you can't get away with blue murder anymore.
And let's
So
face it,
yeah,
those
that's a big
corrections happen in nature, don't they?
yeah. A lion will cuff a cub that's biting its tail, you know.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So now we can jump ahead to the rewards, moving on from Tom and his experience and, what that moment would have been to have seen him, catapulted back into his body and make that movement with Tyrone the horse. What other special moments have there been?
Um, oh, there've been so many. Honestly, Margarita, there've been thousands.
So then
Literally
instead of
thousands.
sharing stories of experiences like that, what has been, I guess, the biggest reward for yourself in stepping into this arena?
Ah, that's a good question. I think the biggest reward for me has been acknowledging my, I won't say well, I'm just going to say the word psychic abilities because it's hard to find another way to put it. But I think the biggest reward for me is learning how to drop into a space that is infinity, and that in that infinite moment, seeing almost as if from beyond, as almost as if I'm not in my body, what it is that the horse is saying to me, or what it is that the horse is saying to the person, or what it is that the person is saying to me that they aren't even really aware of. And
Yeah.
it's like an enormous river of knowing flows through me. And suddenly I become this person that I'm not necessarily in my life on a daily basis, although I try very hard to be her, where there's a stillness and a present moment and a mindfulness and a knowledge that isn't coming from my head or even potentially from me, but it's true.
I'm just nodding my head because just every now and then I have glimpses of that in myself, and it's a magical feeling. It's just beautiful and striving to be better at that. So I'm in awe of what you're able to achieve. Um, so Candy, what our last question here is what truths or words of wisdom have emerged that you would like to share with others?
I think perhaps the words of wisdom would relate back to what I've just been talking about, which is the power of living in the present moment,
Yeah, right.
the power of believing in your intuition, the power of listening to your dreams, and of not limiting your ability to understand the world in your own particular way. And everyone has a unique way of understanding the world.
Yes.
And for me, not always easy, having been, a very successful journalist and for decades, and still writing mainstream journalism today, not an easy thing to be able to say, actually, I can hear horses speak to me. Actually, I can see people's auras, you know. Sometimes the universe will deliver a message to me through a dream that is so clear that I wake up and I understand totally what the message is. You know, these things I think are very, very profound. And the only way that we will come to these is understanding, treating ourselves with love, with compassion, with kindness. And if we happen to be horse people, learning to be very still and patient and soft around our horses, which then reflects back to, of course, how we should be around ourselves.
Oh, I was just thinking the same thing was going through my mind. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Which helps then, as you said in the beginning there, to be more present in the present moment.
Yes. And I think for me, and look, the one thing I do know is that everybody's journey is unique to themselves. And
Absolutely.
yet, and yet, there is this extraordinary universal connection that is also utterly similar to all of us when we experience it. And my way into it, although it's not why I started meditation at a time in my life when my whole life came crashing down, and I'd left my husband, and I was living on my living as a single mum with my two children, and far too many horses, 14 horses, and not enough money, and needing to write, and suffering from a lot of anxiety and some other stuff going on, and losing all our real estate money. So not in a good place, really. And I started to meditate, and I would get up every morning for a while, and instead of writing, which had been my habit, I would meditate. And gradually it became a habit. And then I would get up and meditate, and then I would write a little bit. And over the years, that's become an absolutely daily habit. I meditate every single day.
Yeah. Meditation seems to be a very common thread, or a thread that runs through this mindfulness, this peace, this living in the moment, tuning into yourself. It's very interesting that you mentioned that. And thank you for sharing that particular point. So, Candy, thank you for reminding us of the quiet miracles that unfold when human and horses come together in trust and connection. It's been a privilege to be this side interviewing you and listening to your story. So thank you. And
Thank you.
oh, pleasure's all mine, Candy. And I look forward to sharing the story of another extraordinary, ordinary woman with you all. With heart, God bless, Margarita.
Thank you.